We all have a story to tell. What's your story?
Welcome to In Conversation with Heartlines. My name is Tshepo Sitole and I'm a facilitator at Heartlines. We are celebrating Youth Month in the month of June. And today we will be in conversation with Matshepo Dibetso, and we'll be talking about should we as young people be celebrating Youth Month. Matshepo, welcome to our conversation and happy Youth Month to you, man.
Hi, Tshepo. Thank you so much. Happy Youth Month to you too.
Yes, ma'am. Before we start, briefly, who is Matshepo? Just Matshepo Kema.
Well, I'm a writer, I'm an author, and I also put on the hat of comms managing for my AYM, Agape Youth Movement.
All right.
So, but mostly I enjoy the title of author.
Author. And what's the title of your book?
Careful Calluses, published last year in September, in the middle of that pandemic. Yeah. We're still in it, but I feel like last year was a horrible time.
Yeah. Sure, man. And congratulations on that. Big ups.
Thank you so much. It was, as I'd like to say, a long time coming, but it's one of the things that I'm very, very proud of, which is why I feel like it's one thing when people ask about me that I'll probably bring up first and most. Yeah.
Sure. And just to start off these conversations, we at Heartlines believe in the power of storytelling. And there is so much to Matshepo, within what she does. But I'd also like to give the listeners or the viewers rather the opportunity to say, where was Matshepo brought up? Where is she from? Besides being an author, what else can you know about her?
Well, I am from Leboahomo township in Limpopo. That's where I grew up. Even in my book, there's a part where I dedicate TKZ's I Love This Place to Leboahomo because I feel like that place, or rather the township, honed a lot of my creativity. I mean, I feel like I come from one of the best places just in terms of the people, the culture of just being excellent and trying at it, and going for your dreams. So even when I went to go launch my book, I launched it at home. So for me, Leboahomo is the place where I feel like a lot of who I am flourished in, and I got to, sometimes when you tell a person that, I want to be a writer or I'm a writer, it's sometimes it's an odd conversation. Like people want to be bigger things, quote unquote, bigger things. But I don't feel like being from that place, has set me back in any way. I feel like it was the best place for me to, grow up in. As you can tell, I love where I'm from.
Sure. Yeah. And growing up, what would be your normal activities? What would you be doing as a child?
Gosh, I was such a quiet. I don't know if quiet or reserved really does describe me, but I'd go to school, do well, do very well, and then come back home and chill and whatever else. But I've always been active creatively at school besides academics. If there's a chance to write something, I will. If there's a chance to speak, I will. And if there's an opportunity to sing, I will. So a lot of my growing up was a lot more on the creative side than any other thing besides academic.
Sure.
That's where I find my strongest self, I think.
Sure. And that's powerful, especially when we reference back to the school environment. And I'd like to just take it back to our topic. I think most of us got to learn about Youth Month or June 16 while in school, and what were your thoughts then about June 16? When somebody says Youth Month, June 16, what came to mind? Maybe Nelim Zavalazo, but I may be wrong. But what came to your mind?
I think I grew up in a very politically conscious family. And my parents, especially my dad's politics, transcended more than party politics, which is, I feel like, was one of the best things being raised on, the fact that the politics is how you treat people, how you view society, being, my dad always insisted in participation, participate in community. When there's an opportunity to help people out, do that, volunteer at school, which is why I have a network of friends who were still I keeping in touch with schools, back home. So if there's a need for anything, we go and do what we can. So in terms of June 16, yeah, you learn from it at school, and then you learn it also from, at home. Just my dad shared a lot of his own story. Growing up during the apartheid era, having all of those obstacles stacked up against you, and then you grow up and then you raise children in a family. And so I think a lot of those politics influenced, especially with me, because I was an only child for quite a while until my siblings came. So a lot of his politics I have taken on, and which is why I'm saying that I sort of a lot like to remove myself from party politics instead of saying, no, I vote for this party or, the other. It's literally community. How do we take care of ourselves? What are our values? Are you disciplined? Are you respectful? Are you kind? Are you conscious of the fact that, the classes do separate us? And with your education, what are you doing? So in terms of June 16 and learning from it, it was, from school, but most of the conscientization around the importance of having a politics came very much from home.
Sure. And I think, just to reflect where you are, you said that you are leading comms at AYM, Akapa Youth Movement, which is one of the leading organizations that, champion youth development. And looking at the context of South Africa right now, on the 1st of June, we get an announcement that unemployment is so high. And I was like, what a way to start off Youth Month, right? And just trying to understand that really, is there need for us to be celebrating Youth Month?
Listen, I think memory is important. Memory is what sort of propels us. If you don't have memory, lays ground. It's important to remember. But I think that a lot of what Youth Month is in South Africa has become incredibly commercialized. It's now an ad. Celebrate June 16, and I think there's a huge disconnect between that celebration from a brand perspective and whichever brand that even brand South Africa. There's a huge disconnect between the brand and the lived reality of the youth of 2021. And I think organizations like ours, AYM, sort of want to bridge the gap, between how perhaps, let me say, the powers that be, government, is sort of defining who and what the youth can be and what they can do, and then bring it back to, what is the lived reality of the youth of 2021. And I think those of us who can and those of us who are aware should at all times try very, very hard to, bridge that gap, because I think a lot has been lost in that branding of, June 16 and, so I am tilted a bit when it comes to celebration, because I do believe in memory. I think it's important that we know what happened, in June 1976, because then it sets the tone of who we are. We are emboldened, to sort of like want to achieve our dreams and, fight the system, and I feel like a lot of how we have come to define this is incredibly unfair. Someone tweeted the other day saying South African youth is not angry enough. And I find that to be so myopic, in that even with the youth unemployment, you are angry enough, and how do you enact, or how do you display that anger when you're hungry, you don't have, and a lot of people went to school, they don't have jobs. It's not their fault. And I feel like the sense of politics that always wants, to take people to the street and show how angry we're angry and we're tired too, And I don't think a lot of parents enjoy, because they have their own memory, traumatic memories of protests and whatever else. And that is fed into who we then become, because they like, go to school, learn, and then maybe you would avoid, going on strikes and whatever else. But with the politics of South Africa, you sort of can't avoid that. But I also feel like we tend to overlook the mental health of Black South African children, or and Black, all political, definitions of Black, poor South Africans. And I'm just like, sometimes we sort of just need to, and I guess in celebration, we sort of need to hone in on what we can actually do. And in terms of subjects like that, and stop saying, celebrate with birth, or you're not celebrating it enough, because I think a lot of what the branding has done of the day has done quite a bit of damage. But my point remains, memory is incredibly important.
Sure.
We need to remember.
Sure. Yeah, man. And it's quite important, because I think also us as a generation, we have a lot to do. Whenever I speak to young people, I say to them, we have the biggest responsibility as a generation, because we have to educate the generation that was, as we prepare for the generation that's yet to become. And the biggest question is, how do we actually sit down and reflect? And I think that's what we missed in the process, that as you're saying, we are tired simply because we're not given the opportunity to sit down and reflect. Sure.
And I think also reflection is important. And I think what sort of always happens is that we focus on June month as the only month that we can, and quickly trying to I don't know, get every other thing that the youth is dealing with and putting it into 30 days is unrealistic. And I think quite often that's where we miss it too, because I feel like the work is ongoing, and it should be made a point to say the work is ongoing. So for Youth Month, right now, you and I should be looking back on what youth initiatives that were started in June 2020 have been able to do in the past year. That would be a good way to sort of bridge the gap of memory and action. And I think a lot of the time, when the conscientization of June 16 happened, it was memory, and then maybe not enough action, to say, okay, we remember June 16, 1976, but what are we actually doing, in terms of systemically and structurally, how do we shift, how do we anything, but let it be ongoing and nothing, and not a thing that can be fit into 30 days. That's unrealistic. And we keep having these conversations, and sometimes it gets a bit annoying. And and we're youth, we're active, we want to do all of these things. We want to travel, we want to make money, we want to work, we're very passionate, we want to create, but a lot of those things need to happen in an environment that is conducive for all of it. And quite honestly, not a lot of our environments anyway is conducive for us, to behave and act that are most optimal, if I can say that. So I think it's quite important, to reflect, yes, but reflect on what exactly.
Sure. Yeah, man. Yeah, power. and as I've said, we as Heartlines really do embrace the culture of storytelling, and we believe that we are because of those who are around us. And I know I'd like to just go back to the role that your father played in probably potentially where you are in terms of saying, look, I want to serve. And do you think, do you maybe see your dad as a definition of activism, and does he encourage you to say, actually, there's more to be done and we can do better?
Always. I think I always go back to my dad being the first person. For one, I'm a girl and I've always been very loud and quite opinionated, and if that thing is not quite celebrated or honed or respected at home, trust me, you won't be able to do it anywhere else. And I because the first place that they'll tell you shut up is at home. But my father has never taught me that. He's always asked for my opinion, and that has sort of made me, into a thinking, person, because then he sort of encourages it. He has always encouraged it. So yes, he was my first picture of how activism can and should maybe or could look for me. But I also come from a family that is just very, in terms of community, there's an insistence on be of use to the people around you. Like I said, memory is important. I always also look back to the memory of my maternal grandmother, who helped build a church in one of the villages there, and just starting that project as a woman. She passed away in 1997, but that memory is still quite, important, and it's important to me to just be of use, to, and I think we also, what I like to steer away from is the role defining. People want or title defining. People want titles. You want to say, oh no, I started this big project. Be of use. Let it be known that the child next door can come and ask you for help when they're doing their homework. That is activism. Education is important. And if kids don't have access to the internet, you can go to your high school, take your laptop and show them how to get on the internet if they're struggling with that. So I think a lot of the times we get lost in titles. And that is one of the things that sort of stops us from being useful, because I think a lot of people are like, oh no, but I don't know how to do A, B, C, and D, but how else can you be useful? And I think it's important to be useful to each other. Which is why I say, for me, and that was my first view of activism, that it doesn't have to have any big title, and it doesn't have to be from any big organization. Being useful where you are is very, very important to the larger narrative of what activism is. You don't have to be in the front lines, picketing, but what are you doing? Are you giving people water? Are you able to hand out pamphlets? Are you able to activate on social media and tell people about it? That is, a form. So we also need to reimagine what we think activism is, because I don't think, for me, that activism is a jacket that you wear, and then when you walk out the door, and then you come back in, and then you put it, on the door, and then you remember it tomorrow. It transcends, and I think we get lost a lot with that transition, because we're just like, oh no, okay, I can speak about this somewhere else, but not at home. No, be about it everywhere.
Yes, it's quite deep, man. And I'm saying it's deep in the sense that we are brought up in a generation and a society that's like, do you, you know, and you then forget that in the process of doing you tend to be very private and exclusive, that unless this thing is beneficial to me, I'm not going to commit to it. But now when you, yeah.
No, I'm saying that sort of moves away from even the idea of community that we have. I mean, South Africa speaks a lot about, in mine and your languages, we would call it Wotu. South Africa speaks a lot about Ubuntu, is literally entrenched in you know, how we believe community is and whatever else. But if you're Ubuntu, sort of, you can wear it and take it off, I sort of have a problem with that.
Sure.
I think it's important that Ubuntu becomes a thing that, you know, is all the time. And we don't take it off just because you're no longer at school, or you're no longer at church, or you're no longer at any place where it's visible. That thing should be visible all the time in every way. And I think it's very, very important that we insist on that, just as a society, you know, growing up and raising each other as well.
Sure. And you know, as you say that, I'm thinking of the quote, kaSizulu, indlela ibuzwa kwabaphambili. And it would be interesting to just find out that, do you think that we are having the correct multi-generational conversations? You know, are we exactly. You know, are we asking our parents the right questions, or are they asking us, if indlela ibuzwa kwabaphambili, what are we supposed to be asking them? And how do we create that environment, you know?
Listen, I think, are we having the multi-generational conversation to its optimal? No. We could, there's always space to be better. That's an ethos that I sort of believe in. There's always space to be better. You can get better. But I think also that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of just healing. I think South Africa, just as a country, has gone through a lot. And if you can imagine just how much we've gone through, and then imagine too the things that our parents have gone through, it's a lot to unpack in one lifetime even, you know. I think our parents have gone through unimaginable trauma through, apartheid and other systems that have just, put in place these horrendous rules and laws that have sort of inhibited, their potential. And it's painful to know that something like this, having a conversation like this, was probably something, or not anything that any of the people in my family 2 generations back could have imagined. Whether or not they were capable of it, that's not the point. The point is, when you're so stifled of your dreams, you survive a lot. And I think a lot of that instinctive survival is also put into us, where you're just like, the goal. What's the goal? The goal is get an education. So sometimes, quite a lot in our surviving, considering we live in a capitalist society where money is important, you need to keep making money and all of these other things, it's hard to have important conversations. It's hard to start healing. It's hard to focus on mental health. I mean, just for example, the conversation around mental health started not so long ago. And I'm seeing it now with our current Miss South Africa, where she has, these Monday conversations around mental health. But do you understand that in itself is still a very new conversation? It's still a very new conversation around, are we able, can we talk about the fact that I've had, mental health issues? And if a person as young as probably 22 still has difficulty, navigating their own emotions or mental health. You imagine what a 50-year-old is going through, and those are my parents' ages, etc., etc. So I think we could be having we could be having the intergenerational conversation, but it's difficult, Tshepo, I think, and I think we really do need to empathize with our parents quite a bit, because generally we all just trying our best, hey? And I think we need to sort of give wiggle room for that, we're all just doing our best, and which is why I'm saying, even in memory, and I think the memory is always, oh my God, go for it, you can strike and you can whatever. But are we aware that even Black people, Black children, our Black parents deserved joy, peace, to live in a world that doesn't expect of them to just constantly be passionate? Can we be passionate about, just, having joy, being peaceful and all of that? And unfortunately, in our language, those things sort of become luxuries, which is why I'm saying memory is important, but also in our memory, we should also be aware that they don't have to go through that system that put in place those type of things. And so when we're having a conversation around these intergenerational dialogues that we could be having, it's important to also note that other people probably don't even have a language for those things. And other people are our parents. And we need to empathize a bit with that. And for us who have the language, speak on it. Speak on it as much as you can and do something about it. But I want to always steer away from saying that, we should, be fighting and all of that. Black people are tired. We're tired. We're poor. We're unemployed. There's a lot to unpack. But I think exercising that unpacking with empathy is and which also leans into our ethos as people of South Africa. We're saying we have, Ubuntu, That's important.
Yeah, and in that chain of conversating, here at Heartlines, we have a tool that we use in our storytelling process: ask, listen, tell. And I think also it would be something that all of us could keep to. It's something that I also had to learn to do with my parents, to be able to ask, to be able to listen. But the most difficult thing to do with our parents, for me, is to tell. You can't say, hey, but
you always have to tread carefully.
Yeah, is she ready? But if you're given an opportunity or a chance to be sitting with the 1976 generation, what would you ask them? How would you listen as Matshepo? And if you're given an opportunity to tell something, what would you say to them?
I would like to start with the tell. I think I would say thank you, for one.
Sure.
And two, you didn't deserve any of it.
Sure.
And I think the telling also, and and also I think I am a bit conflicted with the telling, because some of the 1976 youth are the people in power now, and in power in government, and you just sort of also just want to tell them to just please listen to us too.
Sure.
And because what it's like to not be listened to, and I think listening is easy, but are you heard?
Sure.
Does someone hear you? And I think sometimes quite a bit we tend to miss that too. Thank you, yes, because memory is important, and no one deserves to go through any of that type of trauma of getting killed for an education. or getting injured for an education, or, saying, I don't like what is happening, and then being told, okay, you'll die there. No one deserves that. But I also feel like then they also carry a responsibility, for those of them who survived it and are in power, aka in government now. I think, man, imagine yourself then and think about it now and how we feel with a system that is not working for us. Because if the system was working for us, then you wouldn't have quoted the stats that you did when starting this conversation. And we need to create conducive environments for Black people to thrive. We need for youth to thrive, for the poor to actually not be impoverished anymore, for the impoverished to no longer be, impoverished anymore. So thank you. Yes, I reiterate that a lot, because I think the consciousness of the fact that there's something wrong and we can press on and actually, change this thing is very important. It's important for reimagining the future. It's important for creating a conducive future. But also, I would like for the youth, especially the youth of 1976 that is in government now, to start listening to the youth of 2021 and actually hear them out and enact those things, because it's sometimes people like to say, oh, the youth are so lost, they don't know what they want, all of those things, and it's false, because the youth knows what it wants. These must all happened.
Sure,
and it's sad that it happened on the watch of that youth of 1976, and not much was done around it. So it's difficult for me to sort of bring it into one big conversation, or even hone in on one thing, because I think it's a lot of things, but I think it's important in those many things to sort of say that we there's a lot we can gain from each other. There's a lot we can get from each other. We can bridge the gap together. But someone needs to be willing to give, a lot more. And I don't think that South African youth I think South African youth is very creative. They're very smart. They're very conscious. They're very, because you and I would not be having this conversation if there wasn't room for those type of things to exist. And they exist a whole lot more in other communities that are not visible. And I feel like that visibility can only come through if there's a system and a structure conducive enough for, for that to happen. So I think the youth have been bringing the A game for the longest time. And I'm just needing, the powers that be to sort of bring it in. And if they're saying we're struggling, then can we help to bridge the gap, through the various organizations and structures that already exist? Can we then start having conversations? And I'd like to lean in back to what we are doing at AYM. And I remember we had a conversation with me about how I value intersectionality, and taking it from Kimberly Crenshaw's definition of it, that it's important that our approach to problem solving, is not only one-sided, and we need to have a multi-sectoral, a multi, generational and an intersectional approach to things, because our identities, always and sort of, intersect. And I think that is important. And I think also there's a thing that we tend to not do. I think there's room for older people to learn too. And I think sometimes we sort of close that door. And I think as youth, empathize the fact that they probably do want to learn, but don't have the language for it, as well. Yeah, they also want to learn, but don't have the language for it. So I think there's a lot of room all the time, for either of us on either side to improve. And I think that's an important part of life generally.
Sure, yeah. And you know, I'm taking the reality or the concept that there is an opportunity for both of us as generations to learn from each other, but the difficulties in the language and you know the wording is quite difficult. As we wrap it up, you know, your parting shots, also Matshepo, and probably just give us a heads up. Where can we get your book and yeah, and your parting shots?
Okay, this is my book, Careful Calluses. It's a poetry anthology, poetry collection. Basically with 5 chapters, I talk a lot about identity, being Black in South Africa in 2021. I write about my father, I write about family, I write about mental health, I write about trauma, I write about what I imagine, you know, South Africa to be and what I imagine myself, you know, to be, because I feel like there's a lot of growth, there's a lot of opportunity to grow all the time, which is something that I like doing. I think we can always get better. So if you want to learn more about, you know, my book and how to get it, www.carefulcalluses.co.za. That's where you will, you know, get all the details and, you know, can order.
Sure.
Yeah.
And your parting shots, you know, your parting shots as we close off the conversation.
Happy Youth Month to the youth of South Africa. I know how difficult being alive in this era, especially now in a pandemic, how difficult navigating everyday life is. And I'm sorry about that. I think we're all going through quite a bit. But, you know, stay strong. And lean into the things that make you more of who you are, whether it's writing like I do, whether it's speaking on it. Don't get tired of doing that and being yourself. And if you do get tired, rest. Our mental health is very important. Rest and, you know, go back at it. And yeah, I think it's difficult being who we are in this time and space where there's just a lot happening and there's a lot that we have to deal with, and none of us, you know, deserves that type of strife. And in June month, when there's a lot of, perhaps even brands will go, let's celebrate Youth Month, and you feel like there's nothing to celebrate, that's okay too. Because your life is a reflection of what the reality of South Africa is. And that's an important reality. So in reflecting on Youth Month, if there's a lot that you're not finding resonance with, take heed. It's fine. We're all in this together, one way or the other. So you're not alone in how you're feeling, even in the frustration. And I think that's important to note. But yeah, happy Youth Month to the youth of South Africa. I hope that the world gets better for us. I hope the system gets better for us. I hope that structurally something gives sooner or later. But otherwise, you know, take heed and find the pockets of joy that are available and use them, and, you know, be there and be present. And yeah, so much love for the youth of South Africa. So much love for everyone in Lebochum. Shout out. Those are my people. Shout out to AYM. And yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you so much. Shout out to Heartlines. Thank you so much for this conversation. I love talking. I can do it forever. But thank you so much for the opportunity. I really, really enjoyed it. And I appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for making time for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tshepo. Bye.
A beautiful and amazing conversation I just had with Matshepo. And it got me thinking, in a sense that, one, concerning activism, what am I doing? And why am I doing it? And it's quite impactful that our view of activism must always result in something public. But today she challenged me in a sense that do it because you want to, not because it's expected of you, but do it because you want to. And lastly, we must never take for granted what was, the importance of memory. And continuing with the journey, when I have an opportunity, I'll continue to ask those questions, because in that memory, more than anything, lies lessons that I can learn from and I can pass on to this generation. If you'd like to start having those multi-generational conversations at home, at work, or even in your church or community, please do visit us on whatsostory.org.za, and you can get resources that can help you facilitate that process. That's it from us. Have a good evening.